Hello and welcome again to Redacted Nuisance, this 15 minutes of just monologuing nonsense from me, Dr. J, use they as a pronoun, who wanted to call this queer nuisance and then realised that putting the word queer in front of it would mean that it would not be visible to people, so I called it Redacted Nuisance. And using the word visible there is really the key to today, because I was going to rant along on the notion of visibility, because it's something that, because of Trans Day of Visibility coming up on Monday, so this is one of the few of these that you might want to listen to relatively around the day. But anyway, there's a Trans Day of Visibility, and this came about because the only celebration of trans lives was the Trans Day of Remembrance, which is essentially a day where we mourn those who have died and who have been killed in the last year, simply for being who they are, for being truthful about who they are, for being visibly who they are. They often are. People have a tendency to murder trans people slightly more often than they murder other people. And we have a day of memorialising that called the Trans Day of Remembrance. And when that is the only day where you're thought about or you're mentioned in the days of, it's not that great. So somebody came up with the idea of this Trans Day of Visibility, which is where we celebrate and we are visible as trans and gender diverse and non-binary people. And that is become a much more complicated thing to be. So I'm going to read something that I wrote for my workplace and then give some added perspective that happened during this week on this, which I think makes it even more complicated. You all know that I work at ThoughtWorks, so I'm not going to take away where I work. At this time this is recorded, I'm working at ThoughtWorks, and I'm working for a really lovely client. I won't mention their name, although it will take people about 30 seconds to figure it out from what's been published, etc. But in this case, I'm not going to mention the client just because I want to preserve some sort of idea that I might want to make you work for information. Anyway, my perspective. Being visibly trans or gender diverse is complicated. Like any good consultant, my general response to any question is, it is complicated. And at the current time, being visibly trans or gender diverse is complicated across multiple countries. I have the advantages of a supportive team, a client who is keen to learn more about inclusion, and a working environment that means I can be visibly me at work in both ThoughtWorks offices and in client spaces. Stating my pronouns is allowed in meetings and in email signatures, and being part of the client's LGBTQ+ group is encouraged. We need to be mindful that this is not always the situation for all people. We always need to check in with our colleagues when they start on a new project, whether they feel comfortable being visible as a trans or gender diverse person. We know that in some spaces, something as simple as stating pronouns will be a high-risk activity, and this creates unique challenges depending on region, risk profile and vulnerability. Having to hide part of yourself to come to work, to be able to be part of the team, is a hard space to be in. Trying to feel safe while doing this adds a layer of complexity that is hard to imagine if you haven't been in this situation. Check in regularly and listen to your trans and gender diverse people. Be aware you may not know if those you work with are struggling. We're very good at masking, especially when they don't feel safe to be themselves. Take from them the cues of how visible they want to be in this client right now. So I wrote that in after lots of thinking in about 20 minutes, trying to express what it is like to have the, I was going to say, pleasure of being able to be visible at work. I can go to work as myself, as my genderqueer, non-binary self, transgressive genderqueer, non-binary self, or transgressive, non-binary, genderqueer, whichever way you want me to state my state my gender. Um, I can be proudly and openly myself, and I don't have to hide that. The extra work that goes into masking and hiding your gender, avoiding having conversations, avoiding the conversations around which bathrooms you use, avoiding those conversations around just even stating your pronoun, allowing people to use the wrong pronouns for you, to maybe use an old name for you, to maybe not call you by the name that you prefer. Um, those are the things that we often go through to simply be employed. Because while diversity is now a whole complicated thing, even when diversity was the now and happening thing, it was still very, very difficult to get people to make space to be visible as a genderqueer, non-binary trans person in a workspace, and especially in a consultant level professional workspace, because there's lots of things of like, oh well, it's fine to be as genderqueer and as out as you are and as queer as you are in insert assumptions about the charity sector and the arts sector here from consultants, but it is not so fine in a consultancy space. Insert entire assumptions about the way that our consultancy clients will treat somebody who looks a bit different when they work or looks outside of the gender binary when they walk in. And those are the things that some of us do to get employed. I used to run around being suited and booted. Well, attempting to look suited and booted. I always just looked like I looked like an overgrown school child, because I don't have a lot of hard edges on my face, and even when I've got a sharpish haircut and attempt to suit and boot, I look like a 14-year-old. A big 14-year-old, but a 14-year-old. My face is really soft. And that creates all kinds of confusions when you've got a shirt and tie on. And it's just one of those things of my jeans and my makeup and how I look just makes suiting and booting and some of that a little bit harder. Um, One of the other things that also happened was I went to a show uh, done by some marvellous friends who are non-binary and wonderfully gender diverse on stage. The diversity on stage was outrageous. There were different bodies, there were different genders, there were different styles of doing drag and burlesque and performance, and it was just wonderful. And one of the most amazing pieces was two of my friends sang Wig in a Box from Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and I had to do everything not to sob. Wig in a Box has always been one of those songs for me that really represented the level of masking that you have to do, the taking on and off identities to go out and go to work, taking on and off identities and the ability to be yourself. And that happened all throughout my life, where there were identities that I wanted that I wanted to start to explore and to show, that I had to keep boxed up and could only take out in specific ways and specific spaces, and I was not allowed to do anything. The wig had to stay up on the shelf in the box. Um, and when my friends start singing about "I'm never going back," it it broke me. I was I was broken for days, because there are people who are having, in the current climate, to roll back who they are, to go from a state of being open and out about who they are, about being able to get the medical treatment that they need, the hormones that they need, everything that they need to feel comfortable, to feel congruent with their bodies. They can do all of that, and they've done that work, and they've done the hard mental work, and they are having to roll everything back because because the way the world is going now. There are so many spaces where it is not so safe to state your pronouns, where it's not so safe to be visibly gender diverse. It is not so safe to be visibly different from some kind of and I'm just going to use the word fascist ideal of gender, where women are, and I mean, honestly, just go and have a look at the images from the 1930s, and you get a sense of the fascist ideals of womanhood and manhood. And if you don't fit within those two rigid regimes, you are under question. And some of us will never fit into that. Some of us can mask and fit into that, but in doing that, we damage ourselves. We damage our mental health, and sometimes we damage our physical health doing that. And the fact that people are having to go back to do that, to stay employed, to be safe, just breaks my heart. Because in my lifetime, I've seen the society that I live in go from not accepting any kind of gender diverse or 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 queerness, just not really going for it, to suddenly it's massively accepted. I was part of this, as I was joking in the toilet queue. Wake Me Up Before You Go Go came on, and I said, yes, we used to think that George Michael. And we also thought that Boy George was straight, but we definitely thought that George Michael was straight when that song came out. And one of my friends turned around and said, yes, the three genders. George Michael, Freddie Mercury, and Elton John. Those were, and I was like, they were all considered straight, and it's like, yes, and that is just so the younger people within the queer community just could not understand how three such queer icons could be considered straight, whereas me as a teenager just had no concept that those were three queer icons, because they were not able to be out about who they are. And now I look and I see Doechii, I see Billie Eilish, I see Chapel Roan, I see all these queer artists coming out in the mainstream, not just in my little queer corner of the world where, every artist is queer. But in this mainstream, I'm seeing queerness and transness and non-binariness and this wildness of sexuality and gender being open and being celebrated. And yet there are still people who have to go back into a closet to put the wig up on the shelf and just have to hide who they are and make themselves not visible. So on this, coming up to this Trans Day of Visibility, my entire thing is that if you're able to be visible, that is an amazing privilege. Make the most of it. Be yourself loudly and proudly. Be who you are. Take that into your workspace, into your schools, into your home, out in society. Take it to the supermarket. Just be yourself and be fabulous. And if you don't have that advantage, if you are having to hide who you are for safety, know that I've got your back. Know that we love you. Know that you are loved and you are cared for, and that you have to go back and hide who you are breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because I know what it costs to have to do that, and I feel for you, my sibling. You are my siblings, and I feel for you. I feel for all those people who have to hide who they are, because us as queers are the ultimate code switchers. We know how to turn our queerness on and how to turn it off. And if you can turn it on and be visible, be wonderfully, magnificently visible. Have that support around you. Get in your life, there should. I'm going to be controversial here. If somebody's not supporting you, do they deserve to be in your life? Ask yourself that question. Because if they don't support you, do they deserve to be around the fabulousness and the marvelousness and the wonderfulness that is you? Because I, quite frankly, don't believe that they do. I allowed some people who didn't support me in my life for a lot longer than they should have been. And now I'm very much only those who are supportive and love me for who I am, for this crazy, messy, weird mix of gender and sexuality and mental health and disabilities and all of those things. If they do not support and celebrate you, get rid. Simple. And be visible. Be visible. Be happy. And that is bang on 15 minutes. Damn, I'm getting good at this.